Well, I'm looking at this tweet you posted, Trung, real quick. It's from Nicole Wishoff. She said, in hindsight, peak woke was when startups were renaming the monthly all-hand meetings to all hearts because not everyone has hands. She said, good riddance.
Post it. What? This was the peak woke. This is from 2022, the Slack convo. One of the most famous.
There we go. I'm putting, this is one of the funniest
moments. Dude, you remember when the, okay, Bilal, read it. Just read it.
Sorry. In all caps, Pragandua says, guys, I'm stuck in the WeWork lift. And he's obviously panicking. Slackbot responds saying, hi, guys is the gender pronoun. We recommend alternative like folks or everyone, your team, crew, etc. We appreciate your help in building inclusive workspace at Head Out. Then he responds, folks, I'm stuck in the WeWork lift. It's the all caps that really makes it, because it's just like, clearly this person's panicking. All right, welcome to another episode of No Investment Advice. You got Trung Phan, Bilal Zaidi. Unfortunately, Jack is on the road, but he should be back next week. Trung, welcome back, mate.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. In full transparency, I think people figured it out. We mentioned it at Christmas, but we had a back-to-back recordings. Yeah. But we got the episodes out. We got the episodes out, but this is live in the flesh.
I don't know how many people ended up listening, but thank you for listening. That was the point, right? We were just trying to keep, I would say actually, well, the break we did, the 10-day gap was probably the first time we did more than a week-long gap, right?
Yeah, I can't remember the last. This was definitely the longest gap we've had from recording, and it was nice to have a little break. But also, I think I'll speak for myself. I was missing it a little bit.
Stories, man.
We were sending each other so many things. I think we were getting amped up, like ready for the recording. So yeah.
Well, let's do this. Let's start with meme of the week to tee up what we're going to talk about. But there's some things that some catch up. People are here for the bands, but what's the meme of the week?
There's some big social media moves being made. We're going to talk TikTok. We're going to talk about Zuck, U-turn from Zuck. But this is meme of the week. I think Jack shared this in the group chat. Let me just share my screen here. And while I'm pulling it up, Trung, why don't you just tee up why this is relevant for us? Because what happened with Zuck in the last few weeks?
All right, so I'm guessing at this point, since over 3 billion people use Facebook-related products, and our listeners are very tech-savvy, just life-savvy, not just tech-savvy, right? We got life-savvy listeners. You probably know that Zuckerberg 180 on the censorship regime that Meta has been doing for the past 5 years. We'll talk about that.
We got Dana White.
They put Dana White on the board, UFC founder. He did a 3-hour podcast with Rogan talking about one of the things. Well, it's related to this meme, so I'll tee up this meme specifically.
Let's tee up the meme
at
here.
The end of the 3-hour podcast with Rogan, he basically said, "I think it's good to have masculine energy at a company." He wasn't necessarily saying the feminine energy is bad. He's like, it's good to balance it. And then this was a tweet from venture capitalist Matt Turk. Matt kills it with some of these memes.
It says the cafeteria at Meta office on Monday. For everyone who's listening, why don't you describe what's going on here?
Some super jacked dude wearing like one of those beaters that shows like your nipples too for the dude. Oh
man, the Titanic music.
He's taking a nice lady's lunch, eats her salad.
But she's happy though.
She's happy with a cover song of Celine Dion's Titanic song in the background. Basically, for the listeners that are so confused right now, watch the video. We're putting the video up there. Hilarious meme. It's basically shown that joke that was trending was this masculine energy is back at Meta. So I don't want to misinterpret what Zuck said here, because there's going to be a lot of misinterpreting on this podcast, people. Like, we're going to be talking about misinformation.
All vibes, no facts, Trung. We're covered. It's all good.
Just to confirm. All right. So, Bilal, again, what are we talking about today? We're going to talk about Zuck's pivot.
Let's
TikTok's
talk about Zuck's
ban.
pivot. So there's a couple things from Rogan. One was the pivot on free speech, the fact-checking discussion, kind of the approach they're taking. And kind of it feels like with Trump winning the election, it feels like Zuckerberg has taken a bit of a change of point of view, which makes sense. So we'll break that down. He also did mention something interesting about AI engineers and the fact that they're going to be they already are developing AI that they think will do work of a mid-level engineer, which is quite, someone we've talked about on the pod, obviously, but to hear it from him directly from the horse's mouth, as they say, is quite a big deal. And then we're going to talk, obviously, TikTok's future. It's January the 14th. It'll be 15th by the time this comes out. Within the next few weeks, we'll basically know very likely what's going on.
No, technically, it's literally supposed to be the 9th Sunday.
20th?
Sunday.
Yeah.
Sunday.
It's in a week, basically. Yeah,
So we'll
so
talk
less
on the
than a week.
CES. Specifically about CES, the Consumer Electronics Show. I'd like to ask Bilal actually if he's ever been.
Yeah.
Have you been?
I actually haven't been, no.
I went to one. I'd like to talk about that, and I'd like to talk about. Let's just focus kind of on Nvidia. Actually, they had an unbelievable keynote. Jensen's
Oh,
the
I
king.
did see that. Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's the full
With
king
the
now,
jacket
man.
on, looking
Yeah.
like a
Oh,
boss.
dude, it was a 10K. For people that don't know, you probably saw some images, but he was wearing a 10K Tom Ford crocodile skin leather jacket.
I
Oh
mean, that's
my
pennies for
God.
him, man. This is just,
Yo,
that's
penny,
like
right?
Zara for him, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
But,
dude,
so
even
yeah,
less than Zara.
Exactly.
That's like the Salvation Army, a 10-cent rack for him. But listen, I like Salvation Army. I bought shit from there. You can find good stuff there. Let's get into
Definitely.
Zuck.
All right, and also actually, we did also want to just acknowledge, obviously, in the last week, the LA fires, man. This has been wild to see, right? You've been following it, obviously, Trunk.
Yeah, obviously, you'd mentioned before I have friends that lost homes there. Obviously, friend of the pod, Board Elon Musk. He's been on here. We chat with Board
so
for
sad.
years now. Man, shout out to Board. He
dude.
posted a video online. Great dude. A lot of people have been affected, but specifically within our community, whole Board and his family are doing okay.
And anyone else impacted, because a lot of friends either lost their house or they've evacuated. People having to still evacuate, so it's a bit of it's a tough situation.
I'm sure a lot of between our listenership and degrees of separation must be dozens, if not hundreds, of people that just our listeners know, right? And man, it sucks. And there's we're not gonna be talking about that this episode. I mean, there's a lot of like kind of like non-related to the insurance angle is crazy, but we're not gonna get into that. Let's talk about Meta.
Let's talk about Zuck then. Did you watch the interview on Rogan?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll walk through the timeline of what happened because it's pretty crazy. Like here, let me read out actually something from DHH. The really big entrepreneur from Europe, kind of did Hey.com, Basecamp guy. Basecamp.
Yeah.
Super vocal.
Do you know what's funny there? When you said DHH, I said in my head Rework, which is the book. Which is kind of an interesting, because I don't think he even wrote the book, it was Jason Fried. But the interesting thing is the association, my brain went to a book straight away, which is interesting.
Are they not collaborators?
Yeah, they're co-founders.
Yeah.
They're co-founders. Maybe they both wrote it, I'm not even sure, but a classic book, a classic business book.
So I'm just going to read out this framing because he actually had a very good framing, and this will be the top level. And I think one of the trends that most interested me about this. So if we were talking about kind of Zuck laid out 5 things in this Instagram video he posted probably last week this time, recording on Tuesday morning. I think it was last Tuesday. But he basically, as it turned out, with maybe a dozen of his Facebook insiders, for a decision this monumental, which will affect 3 billion plus users of Meta properties, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Threads. According to a New York Times article, he didn't really consult very many people. And, that's what happens when you have super founder shares, right? You can actually turn a ship around. But I think this is here's a theme. This is the main theme. This is a continuation of what Elon Musk started with the purchase of Twitter. There was this idea, and I know for listeners of NIA, and Bilal, tell me if you think this theme is correct. It's the idea that if Jack was here, he'd probably agree with and nod with, because he said it 2 weeks ago. I know he did agree with this. Is like the purchase of Twitter by Elon completely changed the trajectory of speech in Western society, right? The kind of the feeling being there was this fusion of mainstream media, the Democratic Party, and the big tech platforms. And, we could talk about whether or not that fusion and what it looks like, with the Republican side, but clearly, basically between 2016 and specifically over COVID, this fusion, which Zuck even talked about on the Rogan podcast, because, this is not just people like you and me and Bilal on podcasts and anon accounts on Twitter talking about it. Like you had Jim Jeffries, a high-ranking congressional politician, bringing this kind of censorship regime, with the documents out into public from his political platform. So essentially, Zuck said 5 things, and we'll key in on a few of them. But he's ending fact checking, and he's moving to a community notes style kind of fact checking, which is we've talked about on this podcast and what X does. The idea with community notes is it's kind of like the speed of the internet. where you have, you know how Wikipedia has editors. Wikipedia. I mean, X is trying to do that with members of X user base, and kind of the key with community notes is you have people that typically disagree, and if they agree on something that typically they disagree with, everybody has voting records, then that makes it more likely that the note that they want to put on a tweet or a post is valid. Again, you can still game it, and it's 100%, but that's kind of the idea. So Facebook is adopting that, right? Facebook, for people who don't know, they've hired over 40,000 moderators, right? And Bilal,
They're
this,
the
like,
same
you talk
as
about the
fact
bin.
checkers, we said, yeah?
Yeah, so like Google, I mean, you worked there. No, so like, it's very similar. Bilal, you talked about where Google hires and YouTube hires people outside of America, right? Like you're hiring people in India and the Philippines to do a lot of this moderation. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know enough about the fact checker thing, but for YouTube specifically, I'm thinking of imagine just a scale of videos that are uploaded.
Yeah.
And just normally there's some machine learning that, or a community member, someone flags a video as being inappropriate, whatever. Just think of all the worst things in the world that could be on video, like murders and terrible stuff like that. And then there's a certain percentage of those that need to be reviewed by a human. And so at one point, I think they had some people here doing it, but yeah, a lot of that is probably like outsourced, and they have people from
now
all over the
that
world
you're
doing
talking, I actually may have combined two thoughts, but the fact checking and moderation, there's a little bit different.
Yeah, that's a good point, because fact checking is a lot more like
the fact checking is literally they outsource it to third party organizations, and that they would fact check some of the, like Bilal said, certain things will be automated away, right? Like the worst of the worst, you could pretty much automate. A lot of CSAM, which is child sex exploitation, a lot of terrorist
where there's
stuff.
a legal precedent, that's obvious. It's like a black and white issue.
You will just nuke that content because you can actually AI screen it, right? The fact checking, to Bilal's point, is like the stuff that's maybe more middle ground, and that's not necessarily middle ground, but the stuff that isn't factual, right? Is like the Hunter Biden laptop would be an example of that. Is like, is this a real thing? And then you'd have fact checkers. And he mentioned later that one of the reasons to get rid of the fact checkers is he believed the fact checkers were politically biased. And again, this will cause controversy because some people will be like, well, they're not biased, or they'll be like, well, they are biased, but that's okay because XYZ. But that was the justification. Now the moderation is what I mentioned, the 40,000.
Yeah, so maybe they are slightly different. Yeah.
So that's a little bit of difference. But something he did with the moderators is he had moved that staff from California to Texas. Right. So, and then the gut instinct will be like, okay, we get that, what that means. California is more liberal. Texas is more right leaning. So that the overarching thing, which is what I kind of jumped ahead with the DHH tweet here. He had multiple tweets, was about the cynical take is Zuck is going with the political wins, right? He's going with obviously with Trump in office. This is much more palatable. If Kamala Harris had won the election,
just real quick, the contrast before and after for people listening only. This is very millennial
this is from
core
Ram,
here.
Friend of the pod,
Ram posted this, and it's just like the old school. Was it V-neck?
Yeah.
Old school, Mark Zuckerberg hair. But then look at it, Gen Z with his chain out. He's got his headpiece going.
I found an
incredible
comment on the Rogan podcast. The comment which will kill you. It goes. All it said was Zuck looked at Jack Harlow and said, "Yep, that's my look now."
That's so good.
So Bilal, hold on. Let me tease through before.
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna talk. So people are like, okay, Zuck, dude. If there's one thing about Zuck, it's this. This dude can, if you're listening,
he's
you can't
doing
see
the
Trump
weave.
fan right now. I'm weaving. I'm in the ring and I'm like, I'm missing the punch. Dude, Zuck takes punches. He fucking bobs.
He's on the rope-a-dope life, know?
Let's walk through what Zuck's done, okay? I know I'm holding this DHH tweet back, but everybody will understand. Is Zuck going to political wins? Yes, he is going to political wins. If Kamala Harris had won, he would not have done these things.
Yeah.
Period. He would not have done it.
I agree.
Right? Yeah. Okay. So, and the third thing I'd mentioned, which he definitely would not have done, was now they're allowing, some people would call it hate speech, but other people would say it's free speech. Again, choose your fighter. Your mileage may vary. But now he's allowing on Meta platforms people to talk about issues such as transgender, Islamophobia, what other thing? Transgender, Islamophobia, what are the hot button? Immigration. Hot button issues, right? these things by default were just nuked on Meta platforms for the last 4 or 5 years. And he said, yes, we try to deprioritize it. But now he's saying, he basically said, if they can talk about this in congressional floors, which they can, he's like, I think it should be allowed to have here. And he more or less said, I understand there's going to be a lot more bad stuff that happens on our platforms because of these policies. But he also said there were so many false positives, millions and millions of just normal posts were just getting nuked. And then he's pulling the free speech card. And the people are the critics are quite cynical of that, right? But now back to what we're talking about, the weaving. Here's a Zuck weave. Launches Facebook, okay? Launches Facebook. Starts
so I'm laughing at your little hand.
Zuck, you're loving it. Launches Facebook.
Go on.
Starts with Ivy League schools. Realizes that that first status symbol isn't enough, right? Like MySpace might come in and win, so he opens it up to everyone, right? Opens it, and then young children too in high schools. Some people are critical of that. Zuck's just weaving it and going with it. The one thing they actually did do you remember, Bilal, when they rolled out the newsfeed the very first time?
Oh, yeah.
That your post began. How mad were you?
Revolutionary.
But how mad were you?
Oh yeah, mad, because we were basically like posting. I mean, for me, when it first came out, I was at college, and it was like, yeah, you're using it as a private social media feed for college pictures, basically from nights out.
And now it's
then
public.
all of a sudden, a few years later, now you've got family, you've got employee, like people you work with, and all of a sudden you could go and click back to 2007, and then straight away.
But the
point
what he's saying is this: the newsfeed was this.
Yeah.
You could always do that, but there's friction. You'd have to think about going to someone's profile.
You would be going for ages.
Yeah.
This now you'd
but
literally
now
click a button.
Just scroll. And
it wasn't designed for that, right?
Exactly.
It's like I was thinking about it with Twitter. You know, when Twitter changed, or X has changed likes, right?
Yeah.
Remember now likes, they're not. It used to be
Public,
if you like something, it would show up in your friends' feeds as Bilal liked a post. Yeah. And now it became like private or whatever, pretty much, right? And so, but like in the future, that could potentially change again. And if that's the case, a lot of people will be like, oh man, I didn't mean to like, I was just trying to work on my algorithm here. Now all my likes are public again, so that can get some people into trouble, So, but yeah, so back to the news feed. What else were you saying?
So the point of the news feed is that people didn't like it, but it turned out they did like it. And you're right. Like we're talking about
that's
weaving
a good point. Yeah. Like he's done it he's taken the heat.
We're talking about the bobbing and weaving. Yeah. So again, now they go public as a company, right? A week before they go public, he buys Instagram for $1 billion. Again, everybody's like, what is going on here?
Yeah,
turns out to be
like
one of the
no
greatest
revenue. What
acquisitions.
are you doing?
Yeah. One of the greatest acquisitions in tech history. They go public, right? When they go public, the majority of the revenue is on desktop. And then, I don't know if you remember, but Facebook, I think, fell by within 50% within a couple of months of going public. I think it debuted $100 billion and got down to $50 billion. Critics were like, I don't think Facebook can make the transition to mobile. This is Zuck, bobbing and weaving.
I remember that, yeah. Because they were saying about ads too.
Exactly. And Bilal.
I think it went from was it $40 to $20 or something like that?
No, exactly, 50%.
Yeah.
But here's, Bilal, let me ask you. What ended up happening? It turned out that Facebook, the newsfeed for Facebook specifically and Instagram, is literally the greatest ad unit you can have on mobile. Takes up the entire screen. And you just scroll.
Takes up screen. It feels like content versus before it was like banner blandness on desktop. Go. Compare that to what it was before, right? Feed, and on the right you'd have those annoying ads.
Yeah.
And now it's like integrated into the feed.
So we're on the same page, right? He's bobbing and weaving here. Bobbing and weaving. That's what we're getting at. And then, but this is where it gets interesting, right? 2016 happens. Facebook gets blamed. This is kind of where it all started. This kind of misinformation, this fake news, this Russian interference. People, we're not going to get political here, but it's through multiple levels of investigation, that initial instinct that Russia had influenced the 2016 election has turned out to be just the biggest pile of horseshit in the history of like fake news, right? How many times was Trump investigated? Comey ran the entire 2-year investigation. They found nothing, right? Facebook was blamed for running ads. Remember Cambridge Analytica, that whole thing? But what's crazy was, you remember when
they did
Obama,
do some bad stuff with that, I think, no?
They did. But what the point is, they didn't swing the
not
election
necessarily related to the Russia part. Like this.
If you actually look at the amount of money that was spent by, does Russia try to do Russia agencies try to influence people on social media? Yes, 100%. Does China? Yes, 100%. As we'll talk about.
Does the USA? Probably yes too.
Does the USA? 100% it does.
Yeah.
Did it swing the 2016 election? No. this is not even debatable at this point with the amount of research that's come out. And you remember 2008, 2012, how much people were loving the Obama administration for being tech first, right?
Yeah, it was the first social media election, they called it. The same way this one was called the podcast election.
Exactly. When this all goes to the point that we talk about on this podcast a lot, is like, this everything's so bipartisan. Everything is about your team versus my team and tribal. When Obama was doing it with Facebook, people are like, oh my God, wow, amazing. They're targeting, they're using new technology to find voters, right? Incredible. When it's Trump, well, first of all, the Russia thing turned out to be a lie. He was including with Russia. Secondarily, though, even if let's just say Trump himself and his team were able to better target voters, they're not going to get that treatment that Obama got it, right? So I'm not saying, I'm making an amoral statement here. I'm saying quite clearly the mainstream media has a very strong bias. And then, but this goes back to Zuck. The reason we bring this up though is because Zuck got heavily blamed by the media for this. And this is where we're getting to the DHH tweet that I teased 5 minutes ago and the political wins. Because Zuck basically, over the past 8 years, instead of doing what many saw, what Elon did 2 years ago, which was to take every single sling and arrow when you go against I would call it the establishment, and people will laugh and say, well, actually, now it seems like, he's on the side of the establishment. Well, it's because at that time, everything swung the other way, right? Because now Joe Rogan's more powerful than Jimmy Fallon, Seth Meyers, John Oliver combined, right? But that wasn't the case 8 years ago. You see, like, Bilal, we're on the same page here. Yeah. It's like, so I'm speaking specifically to Zuck. So Zuck took so much heat in 2016. They were blamed so much for Trump's election by, at that time, what really was a Democratic Party, mainstream media, academia, the voices that kind of the set the culture. This is only 8 years. What's crazy is how quickly that changed, right? It's like how much power that kind of that trio I just talked about has lost with the average American or North American or Western consumer of information. And a lot of that had to do with COVID, and which we will talk about. So here's the DHH tweet. So he's responding to a question. The question is, why did Mark Zuckerberg wait until Republicans won the election to do a 180 at Meta on censorship? Because we will discuss, Meta censored so much stuff during COVID, it was insane. And Zuck talked about this on the Rogan podcast. Okay, so DHH wrote, I don't think Zuckerberg has yet earned any right or any assumption of good faith, but it's not hard to see why he'd wait taking a stand until it didn't risk his company. Not everyone has Elon Musk's iron balls and risk tolerance. Speaking to Elon buying Twitter and just basically throwing up a middle finger at advertisers, mainstream media, and these NGOs that were basically trying to break Twitter. This is why the woke era was so stifling. Companies and CEOs across the board were cowed into compliance with a new religion because the pressure from the sitting regime, NGOs, and even just the general vibe was so tough. Everybody wants to be a hero, but it's laughable. No one really can be. So DHH, I don't remember, they went through a thing like this that Brian Armstrong and Coinbase did. They basically said no politics at work. And they got dragged through the mud for it, right?
Yeah, that was a big moment, yeah.
We should talk about Brian Armstrong about that. But I'll end this. I'm going to pass it off to you and tell me what your thoughts specifically on Zuckerberg and the winds of politics and how you feel about it. So this is the last thing from DHH. He goes, that's why Musk was so pivotal to the vibe shift. The price for being early is so high. You legitimately have to be made of different stuff to stick to your guns like Elon did. Zuckerberg isn't Elon, but neither is anyone else. He can't be the only bar that people fall short of. That's a great point. What Elon did was actually quite so singular in terms of peer pressure, right? Now, you know this. Just peer pressure from your employees, your loved ones, your friends. Dude, I've silenced myself for the past 10, 15 years, literally just saying stuff in group chats, right?
Well, I'm looking at this tweet you posted, Trung, real quick. It's from Nicole Wishoff. She said, in hindsight, peak woke was when startups were renaming the monthly all-hand meetings to all hearts because not everyone has hands. She said,
post it. What? This was the peak woke. This is from 2022, the Slack convo. One of the most famous.
There we go. I'm putting, this is one of the funniest
moments. Dude, you remember when okay, Bilal, read it. Just read it.
Sorry. In all caps, Pragandua says, guys, I'm stuck in the WeWork lift and he's obviously panicking. Slack bot responds saying, Hi, guys is the gender pronoun. We recommend alternative like folks or everyone, your team, crew, etc. We appreciate your help in building inclusive workspace at Head Out. Then he responds, folks, I'm stuck in a WeWork lift. It's the all caps that really makes it, because it's just like clearly this person's
that was the moment, right?
panicking.
That was like, no. That was 2000. I'd say peak woke was 2021 probably. But like, blah, hold on. What DHH said, I want you to, I have two questions for you. What do you feel about Zuckerberg's pivot? And secondarily, what do you feel about DHH's thought though, saying like, it's impossible to expect people to do what Elon did, because not only was he the richest guy in the world, he literally is just built of different risk material.
Also just doesn't give, like he'll
but that's
do
what I mean. Is like
wants.
that's an unfair expectation of 99.999%. But that's why it was so brave. So I want to ask you, what do you think about Zuck's pivot?
Yeah, a couple points on Zuck. I mean, like you said, I agree. It's just bobbing and weaving, going, like a decision tree. If this was Kamala winning, I think he would have taken different action. So would have everyone, pretty much. Maybe Elon might not have as much, because
they would have destroyed him all. They would have destroyed him.
Yeah, he would have been in a lot of trouble for sure. But I think it would have been a different approach, which makes sense. Like that's the thing. I don't think any one of these people, someone might call them hypocritical or whatever. I get that. I just don't expect much else. Like, I'm like, I don't know if I call it hypocritical, it's more like they're going to adjust to.
He has fiduciary duties to his shareholders too, right? Like, to be quite frank.
Yeah, and also it's like, why is he doing this? Like, he's not running he's running one of the biggest companies in the world, right? Like his job, whether you think that's right or wrong, is to, build shareholder value, create shareholder value, look out for the shareholders. And so who knows that? It seems like he's become a bit more libertarian. He looks like he's on the UFC life. He's got Dana White coming on board. He's lifting weights. He's eating meats. He's
eating other people's food in the cafeteria, potentially.
Exactly. He's grabbing
young
it. Exactly.
Female. No, I'm joking. He's not doing that.
But I think he will do what the tide is doing. It's like if it moves one way, because it's already started to move. And so that's my bigger macro point is this happens forever, right? Like things go in one direction, and let's say for the last 10 years it was more like, in air quotes, progressive, left-leaning stuff, and some of that was good.
Not air quotes. It definitely was.
Yeah, it definitely was, and a lot of that was good. Like if you go back 20 years compared to that, and then at one point it started getting to the point where a lot of reasonable people, in air quotes, in the middle, would be like, wait a minute, I don't know if you should be, even that example, the guys thing. Look, like, I don't care that much about that personally, but that is an example of like, I'm not clearly the intent is not to hurt someone's feelings, right? Whatever.
No, but this is the whole point. It's the whole good intention.
It's about intent,
hell, right?
exactly. It became, people then weren't speaking up, but they're worried, they're scared to say certain things when it clearly sounded off. We talked about the Gemini stuff that happened last year with the multicultural people, when you would say who are the
Nazis,
draw a picture of Nazis, and it would be like
Nazis,
exactly.
Yeah.
So there were these, and I remember speaking to people who were in some of those meetings, being like, yeah, well, if you say this, you kind of get shouted at by the vocal minority, and that's kind of the point. It's still a vocal minority, but when you get that feeling of being cancelled or cancel culture happening to you, everyone is protecting their own interest, right? Their family's interest, whatever. So I understand. That's what happens. And so normally, as things go in one direction and it gets a bit too much, then you come the other direction. And I bet in 4 years we're going to be looking at, oh, wait a minute, there was maybe some good things that happened, and then there was some extreme stuff that happened, and we're probably going to move back to the middle a little bit again.
No, but you nailed it. So I'll give a very salient example that you'll probably remember. Do you remember the early 2000s when Bush was elected? So a big part of the Republican coalition in the early 2000s was the evangelicals. So this was the group, the religious kind of Christian group that was like, super anti-abortion, and they're basically the shoehorn theory, right? When you go to the extremes of both sides, they end up being the same.
Yeah,
the
exactly.
Same way you have the wokes now, where like you said, the loudest minorities, which will shout you down for just any, like they'll shut you down for saying guys, right? That was like literally the equivalent, kind of aesthetically, as an evangelical where if you showed some skin in 2001, they'd yell at you for being promiscuous, right? It's like it's the same vibe, different sides of the horseshoe.
Yeah, they're both
And
extreme.
Exactly that, and you nailed it, man. I very much can see a world in 4 years where the right is back in power, and I'm very much a centrist, man. I'm like I want normal, common sense.
Or like, were you saying right? Or I mean, the right's in power now, right? So you mean more?
Well, no, they're saying what happens in 4 years when the extreme part of the right, because it's like it's a Nassim Taleb. Do you know when Nassim Taleb's a minority a rule? I forgot what the name is, but he basically says this: the minority, whatever the minority is, the loudest minority ends up setting the agenda, and he actually uses a halal food as an example. He says if you or if you want a kosher, if you want a kosher or halal, or you take even vegetarian as an example, right? If you have, let's say that you're in a community and they had a Italian restaurant, and in that community there's 100 people, and 2 people were vegetarians. Okay, now imagine those 2 people were the loudest people in that community, and if they went to a restaurant and they couldn't get served food, they just fucking lose their shit. They go on Facebook, they just shout down the restaurant for not being inclusive or not offering food for vegetarians. Even though that's 2% of the population, guess who gets to set the agenda? Yeah. If the other 98% is afraid to say anything about those 2%, which is often the case, those 2 people are setting the agenda. And Nassim Taleb wrote basically just says like, often the people that set the agenda is the minority of the group, not the majority. So, and I'm not talking about the minority as in race. I'm talking about
required,
the number.
Also, like your number. Well, I mean, the example I'm thinking of is remember when the WeWork guy sent that thing about where we're only serving vegetarian food in the cafeterias or something now. Do you remember that? That was in 2018.
So what happened?
It was basically just saying like we're only going to serve vegetarian.
Yeah. So
food
what is the population?
Forward.
Probably 10% of the companies are vegetarian,
right?
And
one of the co-founders, I think it was Miguel, probably sent that one, and it was a little bit like controversial at the time because people were like, wait a minute, like what if I want to have? There's nothing. Like you're basically making a moral judgment on something that isn't actually black and white. It's a lot more complex than that, and it was just this kind of 2018 vibes of like we're doing this for the environment, we're doing this for XYZ, for health, whatever. And that's an example where someone that might be a minority, but he was actually someone in power to be able to do
exactly that. And the point I'm trying to make is jumping off your point is you only need this when we went in the heat of this insane kind of woke movement in the past 8 years, it was a small minority of people that kind of set the agenda. And the same thing could potentially happen in the next 4 years, right? And people just want people just want to live their lives.
Yeah, most people I think are probably closer to the middle than the extremes, obviously just by definition purposes. But what I was saying, like now we've moved more to the right, even just with, things coming back. I think even just in culture, we talked about Dave Chappelle's stand-up special like several years ago I think that was when we did the pod. And then just remember there were people that were like, oh my God, I can't believe he's joking about this thing. And I think he's even the one who said, I didn't change, you've changed. Like the things we were allowed to talk about.
It's that famous photo, right? Where the person is standing there and he's in the middle, but then everybody keeps moving. His party keeps moving. Colin Wright made that. So actually, you'd mentioned, or we had mentioned Brian Armstrong from Coinbase. I'll just run through timeline actually of kind of the moments. So like 2016, 2020, obviously 2017 was Weinstein and Me Too. 2016, 2020 was obviously Trump. And during that period, the woke was turned to 11 because they were just fighting everything that had to do with Trumpism, right? And then 2020, you had COVID. You had George Floyd. You had Coinbase actually happened shortly after George Floyd. And basically, Brian Armstrong had come out and said, there will be no politics at this company. And we don't want to talk about politics. We just want to worry about our mission. And I mean, the media tried to destroy him for that. But he did something that would from even when I saw it, he's like, listen, if you don't want to be here, here's a very, very healthy severance package, right? I think it was like 6 months.
And he was also trying to filter out that culture that he didn't want anymore because he thought it was a distraction.
That super loud minority. And it was very fair, right? Listen, when you work at a company, I mean, I've worked at a number of companies. I've been at places where they've offered this for certain employees that they didn't want. It's like, you take it, you're welcome to leave, right? And then he obviously got absolutely shamed by the media for that. Turned out to be, he was right. is like mission focused. Everybody's come around to that basically. Then you mentioned Dave Chappelle. Dude, Chappelle, because he basically did 5 straight specials where he was making jokes
Yeah, it
about
was crazy.
transgender. Right. It was like,
Oh yeah, he was going hard on it. Yeah.
dude, the first few, it was pretty like, the thing is like, you can talk about difficult topics if you package it in humor because you're showing skill, right? I will say this, towards the end, it was too much.
It was a bit like, all right, we get it. We get it.
We get it. Dude, you won.
Well, my favorite one, us both being Asian, I think he's married to an Asian woman, right? Filipino, right? So, yeah. And there's a thing where he's interacting with someone in the crowd and someone called him racist. And then the punchline is like, I'll see you at Thanksgiving. Do you remember that one? Is that one of my favorite, the way he says it? But
what I will say about him though is I just want to add this. I'm so happy he did it though. That's what I mean. And the other thing, another moment, we're talking about timeline of kind of this moment you do remember Netflix employees tried to have a walkout to cancel, but it ended up being like 10 employees.
And also Chappelle, Spotify with Rogan, no? Or there was something around that.
We're hitting these moments, right? It's like, we're going timeline, dude. We're nailing the main points here. Chappelle. So he just stood up and said, no, I'm doing my jokes. I'm not going to get cowed. And remember, this
kind of requires someone who's at that because he's already basically the GOAT and he's got enough money that he can kind of do what he wants. And so that fear of cancellation doesn't apply to him as much as it does to like someone on the come.
No, but this is what I mean is like, it's such a great point, but how many other comedians are at his level though? Hundreds or maybe dozens. No, financially. He's the only one that did it. This is, and the same with Elon. How many deca billionaires are there, right? How many actually stood up and did it? One. Right, so like this is why these guys are so notable in this movement. So Chappelle, again, I'm happy he did it. I think by the end, it was just like, man, I can't do a 5th stand-up special about this, man. It's too much.
Yeah, the same topic.
But the first few were really funny. And then Ted Sarandos, who is now the co-CEO and was actually co-CEO then of Netflix, basically went on stage and said, he just said straight up, it's like, we are not stopping Dave Chappelle. It's like we pay for his specials, we're letting him do it. And Chappelle actually thanks Sarandos directly after that. And then you brought up Rogan. Man, dude, if you could see like a meter of the power that Rogan gained over COVID, dude, that meter.
Oh, yeah, insane.
Have a chart. It's because just like you said, he was a guy actually that could stand up and not be financially impacted. But again, the social pressure is so powerful, man. It's like I heard a podcast that made such a great point. It's obviously Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, I believe, in 1968, a couple months before Robert Kennedy was, when he was running for Democratic nomination. But the point people were trying to make was this: the FBI actually tried to destroy Martin Luther King Jr. first. So if you're not familiar with the story of Martin Luther King Jr. and the FBI was recording like his bedrooms, right? And they were sending tapes of Martin Luther King Jr. and his mistress to Martin Luther King's wife. And this is all publicly documented. You can even hear some of the audio. But the point they were trying to make was the FBI was trying to get rid of him through reputation, not like trying to take him out. Like literally not trying to take him out, but like, because when you destroy somebody's reputation, it also takes down their movement, right? Yeah. But whereas if you kill somebody,
if you just kill someone, it's different. Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, actually makes them a martyr, and it adds, flame to the fire there.
Well, I'll give you some family story on that. My great grandfather, who we've talked about briefly on here, was like he was French, anti-colonialist, anti-French, Vietnamese nationalist. But literally, he was captured in 1925 in Shanghai. Ho Chi Minh set him up. Crazy story. But Ho Chi Minh set up because he's an intellectual rival to Ho Chi Minh. But the point is, the French captured him. But instead of killing him, because they literally said that if we kill him or execute him, he'd become a martyr. So they basically just put him away in a home for 15 years. And he just kind of lost influence. So the point I'm trying to bring is this. Destroying someone's reputation is in many ways more effective than actually taking them out, period. It's because you're taking down the entire movement with them. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, it dampens it instead of fans on the flame of the fire.
So what I'm saying is like this is why the peak woke movement is so wild in the sense of like if you're trying to destroy Dave Chappelle, you're not just destroying him, you're destroying everything he stands for, right? And free speech, free expression, free ideas. That's more powerful than almost anything else you could do, right? You're trying to take that. So for these guys to stand up, that's what's so crazy about it. Rogan What was the? Let's walk through. You and I know Rogan. We listen to not all of his stuff because there's
Friend
way
of
too
the
much
pod.
content.
Friend of
the pod. But so I mean, what were some of the main things that he kind of stood his ground on over the past 3 years?
over the years. I mean, I guess things
Last
he
3
always like that he was speaking up about. I guess
Yeah,
COVID
that no one else
stuff,
Exactly.
vaccine. I guess I think.
Those are the main ones,
a lot
right?
of transgender stuff with sports. He always be
Yeah.
bringing
Oh,
that
that's
up.
true. Yeah.
With UFC and stuff like that. What else is there?
No,
I mean,
those
there's
are
a
the
few
main
things
ones. Those
yeah.
are the main ones that and
Aliens,
also
throw
I
that
throw
in there.
J.K. Rowling. Yeah, aliens too. I throw J.K. Rowling in there. Another person that reached the heights of culture, money, and
That's a good point.
spent all that. I mean, dude, if you want to listen, I'll give a recommendation here. Listen to the Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling. That was by the Free Press. It's incredible. It covers. Listen, it's a complicated issue.
Great title too.
Yeah, great title, amazing title. I come out on the side. I believe J.K. Rowling again. I'm bucketing her with Chappelle, Rogan, in the sense of them being heroes for standing up, not necessarily agreeing with every single thing they said, but just having the fortitude to actually stand up for something they do believe in, because it's tough, right? A lot of people will not do it. So, and again, to emphasize, not agreeing with every single thing they have ever said, but the action they took is extremely important. So Rogan and then Elon buying Twitter. So that's kind of the arc.
Yeah, and so Trung, that's a great timeline there. But also I wanted to come back to the point I was saying about this happens in politics all the time in society. Like you go one direction, you come back in the middle, you go in another direction, and that's just kind of how it's like. Basically, the basics of politics, right? You have progressives. Like literally, the word progressive means progress in whatever that means to that person. But if you think about what that means is, after you make some progress, there's always going to be someone else that says, well, no, that's not enough. There's more progress. We need to keep moving forward, which again, depending on where you sit on that spectrum, you might agree or disagree with different parts of that. So there's, for example, giving the women the right to vote, was at one point a progressive idea. For gay people to get married was a progressive idea that both of us would probably agree with, right? And
well,
so
we definitely do. No, well, I'll thumbs up. Yes, 100%.
yes,
agree.
to clarify, yeah. And so, but what I'm saying, obviously, then you fast forward 20 years, 30, 40 years after that, and it's like, well, actually, the discussions became a lot more to reasonable people in the middle. I'd say, well, like, okay, this is not as core to the same idea that we were just discussing previously. All right. And so that, some of the pronoun stuff, some of the arguing about who can use bathrooms and stuff like that. Like, again, not to say I'm not dismissing it completely, but for me personally anyway, I was like, okay, this is not anywhere near on the same scale as those other two topics I just mentioned.
Dude, 100%. And the thing I'd add is this, is you have to think about why that happened though. You not only did you mention
it's that vocal minority, no?
No, but Bilal, you brought up such a great point. It's not only that the idea of progressivism is that you just have to keep on finding new groups, but here's the key. It's financial. It's about incentives. Think about it. Think about the organizations that help to get gay marriage passed in the United States.
Think tanks and stuff, you mean like that? Or?
What happens to that organization when you get gay marriage passed?
You pass the bill and you're like, okay, well, you're finished now. What else do we need to do?
No, but you see what I'm saying? It's like, I get it from an individual level. This is their life, and that's how they make money. So if they don't find another cause, what are they going to do? This is quite literally what happened with a lot of these NGOs, right? They had to find a next thing or their literal livelihood would have been taken away, which like on that.
And to be fair, trying to steel man that though, they would argue, well, yes, but we also believe in X, Y, Z, right? Like we also care about these issues.
But clearly,
you're right,
there's
incentive
an endpoint,
is to
right?
keep it
there's
going.
So clearly an endpoint where, if I know people, kids at schools now saying like, hey, I'm a cat. Like there's a school in Vancouver where a kid says I'm a cat. They put like, what's it called?
I'm thinking of the Robin Hood guy now that you said I'm a cat.
No, he's like you literally put like a bowl of like cat milk inside one of the bathrooms to like you know what I'm saying? It's like the whole point is
making a joke, like to make a point, or he actually thought
to
that?
be like to honor their identity, like not as a joke. Clearly,
got you.
The example I said is extreme, but that's how far you can take it. This is the whole point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, and so and I agree. And then Trung, the last thing I was going to say is kind of forward looking though. Now is over the last month we've been sending each other all the stuff that happened. We didn't get to talk about in the pod properly, but in a similar vein, there's been this discussion of the tech right and the more far right part of MAGA. because actual friend of the pod, your boy Srinam, there was a whole controversy about H1B visas and all that sort of stuff. I'm sure people listening, yeah, Sriram, sorry. And so this was an interesting kind of point in the timeline as well, which was a lot of people, tech was very, very left-leaning, progressive, whatever you want to call it. And then this election was the first time you had people like, prominent people in technology, VCs, founders, etc., outright supporting Trump, which was an option basically 8 years ago.
Well, the only two people now that did it most vocally was Peter Thiel and Palmer Luckey. Palmer Luckey was fired from Facebook and lost everything he had with Oculus. Started a brand new company.
They haven't, you said?
What do you mean? No, he was very vocal. Like, Palmer Luckey was fired from Meta or Facebook at the time. He had created Oculus, the VR headset, and they fired him basically.
Now he's got
I think he donated like $100 to a meme making group for Donald Trump, and he got fired for it. Right? Insane. Peter Thiel, only one the most vocal guy to stand up about it, and obviously got pillared in the press.
You're saying 8 years ago they did this?
Yeah, 8 years ago.
Yeah, versus now you got David Satt, you got Chamath changing on the All In pod, you got lots of people were in that camp, and so, but I think this was also a pivot point around when that stuff came out, in the feeds a few weeks ago. And I know we're probably not going to talk all the way about it just because it's a little bit old, but that to me feels in a similar. If you're looking at a timeline, there are a lot of people I know, very reasonable people who, may have voted for Trump in this election because of certain policy things they wanted, and they didn't like the Democrats for other reasons. But I know them; they're not like racist people, right? Like that. Obviously, clearly, lots of people.
I'll talk on my 2 cents on the H1B quickly. I mean, I tried applying for H1B multiple times when I was living in the States. Did you ever do H1B, or did you?
No, I had an L1 and then green card. But the point here was there was this kind of thing on Twitter or on X where people like, wait a minute, we didn't realize there are legit, obviously real racist people as part of that party too, and coming out saying kind of ridiculous stuff, like very racist stuff. Not like, we're being sensitive, like straight out Indian people.
Well, let's hit up three. I'll run down kind of three over our topic. I'll get your opinion. Number one is this. So H1B program. So I worked in the United States on a TN visa. So that was a NAFTA visa before they changed the agreement. I think it's called US and US CMA now. But NAFTA was basically Canada, Mexico, America. They had a free trade agreement. And they had a visa that I came on, but the majority of the TN visa holders were actually like strawberry pickers, of like Mexicans coming up to pick strawberries. And it's not like knowledge workers, right? But the idea was I was made for Canadians and Mexicans could work in America. So I applied H1B. For people who don't know, the H1B visa is a temporary work visa. I think it's 6 years. Do you know if it's 6 years? 4 to 6 years.
Yeah, I assume it's like 5 or 6, yeah.
It's a lottery. And the idea, again, is to fill jobs that maybe you couldn't in America. And what the negative of the program, and we'll talk about this, and we talked about it in the chat, is like a lot of it is taken up by these outsourcing companies from India that have a U.S. Headquarters, or not headquarters.
Yeah, and the argument from the people against it is to say, well, you're just trying to reduce your costs. You could be giving that to U.S. workers, but you don't want to pay more.
But the logic of it is very clear. Is because if you're hiring somebody from India, they're willing obviously to take a lower salary, all things equal, because that money they can send back to their family is going to be
and their
quite high,
average salaries there a lot less.
Exactly. And B, the other part of it, which I know from my TN visa, you probably know from L1, when you work on a visa, you have to be with that company, which hurts bargaining power. Because I remember when I worked on my TN visa, like we're talking about self-censorship, it's like I wouldn't say anything in a public Slack that could potentially terminate my employment, right?
Yeah, you're locked in. Yeah,
so that does hurt bargaining power. So that criticism, 100% correct, that it can hurt bargaining power. The other side, though, and the side that the Elon was loudly making, and that a lot of mega people hated him for, was Elon came on H1B. A guy like Jensen Huang today would come on an H1B. And how many maybe lesser employees would you accept to have one Jensen Huang, right? I'd argue you could accept 1 million people. to get one Jensen Huang. So that's kind of the argument is, like such an asymmetric return to get somebody like Jensen Huang or Elon Musk in your country that you kind of want to have the filters less loose. And I think the way to square this is you just don't let it get gamed. Accenture shouldn't be allowed to get 20,000 H1Bs.
That's but I think, I think what you're talking about is completely makes sense. But I was saying this is a rational discussion about the pros and cons of H1B, and there's a real discussion to be had. I think the point is when you're then like any extreme, whether it's the right or the left, in this case, it was the far right people basically being like, we don't need more smelly Indians in the country. There was, I read that on my feed, right?
Awful,
and so lots of stuff like that, right? And so that to me was kind of in this timeline where a lot of people who kind of shielded themselves from that part of the party were like, wait a minute, I didn't realize that's still there, or like, because a lot of these people in completely different worlds, right? And so my point is, as we go back left and right, coming back to the middle, I think fast forward 4 years, very likely will be the tech right in air quotes, where it's a lot about policy stuff related to free market, pro innovation stuff, which I agree with a lot of those policies as well. Is very different to just the old core base of.
No, you're right, and there's going to be a tension there always, right?
Tension, yeah, probably already is. And then similarly on the left side, my hope is that there will be more of a moderate that is also pro-business, and you actually get a good option on both sides.
You know that Bernie Sanders is against H1Bs, right? So you find, they always say politics makes strange bedfellows. So you have mega people agreeing with Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders, yeah.
But you remember what Bernie Sanders' point was, though, was about the working class. He's basically saying the point that you had brought up is if you bring in H1Bs and instead of giving those jobs to Americans, you're undercutting the American opportunities, which is a fully fair thing. Dude, this is actually the thing that's animating Canadian politics right now. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but
I know. Also, we haven't even talked about that.
In the past 3 years has opened Canada used to have the best high-skilled immigration system in the world. It and Australia had a point system that the rest of the world tried to copy.
Oh yeah, the point system. Yeah, especially for like healthcare workers, I think doctors.
Exactly. You basically came in. They had classes as like if you had engineering skills, nursing was a big one, and healthcare was a big one, and then that completely changed during COVID. The argument was initially that COVID meant that we needed more workers for certain jobs, and a big part of it actually came from South Asia, so India and Pakistan. Huge Indian populations in parts of Toronto and Vancouver, and the sad thing, unfortunately, is that the people that are taking advantage of a lot of new Indian immigrants, because they're getting sold a dream. They're getting told that they can come to Canada and build a kind of first world life. But what's actually happening is that a lot of private schools are offering, and I'm putting air quotes here, degrees. And these degrees are total shit. And what's happening
there's a game in the system, right?
Exactly. So what you're having is you're having families in India save up for them decades of savings to send one kid to Canada. And the people that are bringing them over here are Indians and South Asians from a previous generation. So they're taking advantage of their own people.
Yeah.
And it's really bad. And what ended up happening... It's great,
yeah, because that's the argument also for the US where, I think Trump has talked about anyone who gets a certain type of degree should just automatically get a green card. And that is also bringing up this idea of, well, that's quite easy to... game, right? Because you're going to have some people going to some random made up stuff.
What you have to do is you have to make it very clear what institutions are allowed, because actually in Canada, the way they had to stop it, it got so bad. I'll give you numbers as perspective. About 4 million temporary workers, which is 10% of the population, came in the last 5 years. And 4 million workers, a lot, I think majority might be from South Asia, were promised certain things when they were told to come here. Not promised by the government, promised by the people that brought them. And it's impossible to integrate that many people into a country at that time.
And I will say, Trump, real quick on that, just the last thing on that, on the education part specifically, I get the idea, but for me, the incentive there is what we really want are people who are productive members of society and going to help the country in certain ways to fill gaps, right? And we're assuming that being educated from a university even equals that, which nowadays it doesn't necessarily equal that, because how many people are going studying stuff and they're not even getting jobs right now. To your point,
Jensen Huang, this is the example, he would not have been able to get in on these programs, right? Because his family wasn't wealthy. His family wasn't super educated. So like,
especially for technology stuff, it's so skill based versus just
exactly.
But anyway, so that's a separate point.
No, we went down a bit of a rabbit hole, but the point is this. I think it goes back to what the initial point you're trying to make was that you're going to find strange bedfellows in the following years because of the interests are going to bump up against each other is the point we're trying to make.
Definitely. Yeah.
And we should probably wrap this segment up and talk about TikTok.
Yeah, I just want to, let's move on to the last thing on Zuck real quick. We talked about the AI engineer, so I'm just going to share this 1 minute clip here. This is on Rogan here.
Yeah.
I think this year.
Can you hear this?
Probably in 2025, we at Meta, as well as the other companies that are basically working on this, are going to have an AI that can effectively be a sort of mid-level engineer that you have at your company that can write code. And once you have that, then in the beginning it'll be really expensive to run, and then you can get it to be more efficient. And then over time we'll get to the point where a lot of the code in our apps and including the AI that we generate is actually going to be built by AI engineers instead of people engineers. But I don't know. I think that'll augment the people working on it. So I mean, my view on this is like the future, people are just going to be so much more creative and are going to be freed up to do kind of crazy things. It goes back to...
So you get the idea here, yeah? And then just to add to that, can you see this screen I'm sharing? Yeah.
Read it
this
out
was
loud.
On Salesforce. These two kind of contrasting headlines or like posts was Salesforce will not be hiring any more engineers, software engineers in 2025 amid significant productivity boost from AI, Mark Benioff has revealed. And then the next one was about Salesforce bringing on 2,000 more salespeople specializing in artificial intelligence, which is kind of a funny contrast, which, to me, it kind of makes sense because sales is very different to writing code.
No, sales is still, you got to have that. You got to get
and
that.
And Salesforce is a sales company, right? Like that's how they really do it.
Somebody, Bilal, what's the saying? Smile and dial. Like that's the way you do sales.
There we go.
Smile
Pounding
and dial.
the pavement. You know what I mean? But, yeah.
No, but what I was gonna say, Bilal, I was gonna say is the thought actually. Well, Facebook says it's gonna fire 5% of staff today. They say, quote, in air quotes, low performers. So I think this is kind of scaring people.
Yeah, I think the big tech companies are basically moving to that. Seems to be moving to that model. Yeah. I think Google was similar because it's like a very old, Goldman Sachs or is it not IBM? GE, I think did that, right? Wasn't it always the 5%? Like the curves,
GE did the. You had to cut stack ranking. You had to pick.
I think they're 20% of your team. That here.
Yeah.
But 20 might honestly be a little high, but 5 is definitely. I mean, man, like we will.
The problem with stack ranking is, do you have stack ranking at Google?
They wouldn't call it that necessarily, but essentially they kind of were.
It causes politics, right? Because now you're
and it's always that's the point it's at now is where you're going into what's called calibration, which is like where everyone discusses all the scores for employees. And they'll essentially, a lot of the time, be like, you need one person from your team that's getting this bad rating. And essentially, then they get managed out, which I kind of get to a certain extent, like from a high level. But there's lots of people who don't necessarily deserve that. They're not actually a low performer, but they're having to just cut because of this kind of numerical precedent.
No, that's a timely point you're making, but we just wanted to flag that because that was a theme we had for 2025, a lot more AI agents, right? I actually saw this as I'll leave this and I'll make one more comment on Zuck. Somebody said before the end of the year, there will be an AI CEO running a $1 billion company.
Yeah, that might
honestly,
be a stretch, but
how funny would that be? No, but in 5 years, not crazy. So the last thing I'll say about Zuck, here's my overarching theme is cynical about free speech. Was it a cynical move? Likely. Was it the right move? 100%. And the reason why I say that is because these guys were just the amount of censorship that Facebook did over the last 4 years. It was biblical. The amount of this is the easiest example. If you had said that COVID was Wuhan lab leak, nuked, your account's nuked. And,
he gave that specific example and he talked about vaccines specifically as well, which was interesting.
No, he brought up Rogan. Yeah, let's speak specifically what I said is like, and again, he's like, you had And he thought it was bordering on infringing on the First Amendment, where you had the government literally.
Well, I think the example. Did you hear the example you said about the Leo meme that was being asked to be taken down? And so
where
that
it's pointing at the TV screen.
Yeah, and so just really quickly on that, he did say up front, "I'm pro-vaccine. I think it helped." So just that's the first thing. But he was basically saying anything that was even brought up to even potentially talk about the negative side effects, which may have been obviously legitimate for some people.
And there 100% are. You could not even talk about it.
Yeah, you couldn't talk about it. And so he was given that example. And then the humor one was interesting because there's a clear line around satire and humor.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'd be interested to hear people's opinion on that, on Zuck's pivot. Let's talk about TikTok's future, Trung. This is absolutely mental. So this has been posted up in the feeds. Again, like we said, I think it's the 20th, is it? Or 19th or 20th? So
the 19th. I'll get people up to speed. Is like on the 19th, if TikTok does not sell to an American buyer, the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store have to take it off out of the app.
And stores. To clarify also, Trung, what that means is it doesn't mean anyone who's using it currently is going to get wiped from their phone. It just means the updates. Done. No, but it'll still work for a while, but the updates won't update.
But the whole point is that 2 update cycles later,
eventually, it's like a slow death.
It's going to get bricked. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an interesting. Obviously, we've talked about this on the pod. We know where you stand on TikTok already. We've got a few thumbnails.
So this is important because they did a last-ditch effort and went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the argument that TikTok's been making is that they're losing their free speech rights. And in constitutional law, there's been a precedent set where free speech is protected. However, if it goes up against national security concerns, the courts can make a decision. Does the concern of national security override the concern of free speech? In this case, because the TikTok lawyers were not even able to demonstrate whose free speech exactly. Are we talking about the algorithm? Are talking about the Chinese Communist Party, who has a seat on the CCP board? Whose speech exactly is being infringed here? Because if you're saying it is the Chinese Communist Party, then now the courts got to say, well, actually, we think the national security concerns override the free speech concerns of a foreign entity. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's what the argument was. That was a last-ditch effort. So fast forward to Monday evening, we're recording Tuesday morning, a report from Bloomberg and Wall Street Journal, unsourced by either one, denied by TikTok, mind you. Elon hasn't said anything. Actually, let me even Google if Elon's even made a comment on it. But they're reporting that the Chinese government, and this is where it's funny, because it literally says the Chinese government. It doesn't say ByteDance. It says the Chinese government may allow Elon Musk and X to buy.
That's wild, right?
ByteDance. So the
and
point
shout
being,
out to, I think, did Jack say this or you said this on the pod? I forgot.
Jack called this when he did the X rebrand. Well, he said,
so there's a couple things that we're going to talk about. Do we think this is going to happen? Will it happen? Will Elon be able to do that? We talk a lot about the most entertaining outcome is the most likely sort of thing. This would be kind of wild. I mean, the Twitter one was already wild. If you managed to pull this off too, that would be pretty, unprecedented stuff. And then you also wanted to talk about Little Red Book, a new Chinese social network that hit the top of the App Store, you said?
Yeah, so I'll wrap up my TikTok thought, which is I think this deal. So the outlines of the deal sound pretty difficult in that it sounds like it'd be $50 billion, and Elon could potentially get funding for that. And then I think if they go through, my prediction would be the following: combines with X and XAI, the whole thing just gets taken public, and you're talking right there like a ballpark valuation, total napkin math. $100 to $200 billion company with the meme vibes. So that's that. I think it's still probably low probability because there's like 7 days to get it together. And if that did happen, it'd be part of a larger kind of grand bargain that Trump obviously loves to do with China around tariffs and things of that nature. So that's that deal specifically. Now, the other thing that Bilal mentioned, the Little Red Book, interesting situation. The Little Red Book, for people who don't know, the Little Red Book is the book that Mao Zedong, the former head of the CCP, led the Communist Party in China for, I think, 20, almost 50 years in total. But when the PRC started 49. He did it until about the late 70s until he died. So the Little Red Book was just a book of his sayings. It was like basically the equivalent of a Bible for communist China for 3, 4, 5 decades. Now, that name, and I've heard conflicting stories. I've heard Little Red Book actually refers to the founder who went to Stanford. So I don't know if that's true or not. Stanford's color is red, the founder of this app. But the app is basically I'm not even going to say the Chinese name because I can't pronounce it. It's a version kind of like TikTok, but it actually includes it's all Chinese users. So it's hilarious. I actually logged in this morning on it, Bilal. It is absolutely out of control.
Is it mental? What's it like? Is it like? Does it look like TikTok?
It looks exactly like TikTok. But what's so funny is it's I think it's valued at $17 billion. So like pretty valuable for China. I don't know how many users it has. I'm gonna guess hundreds of millions. But there's a hashtag trending called TikTok refugee, and it's millions of posts with TikTok refugee as a hashtag. It's like a bunch of I saw this morning, I saw a black girl, a white dude, and a white girl. Because I scrolled through the TikTok refugee hashtag, and I think it's an Asian dude from America, and it's literally all just like, "Welcome. I would love to join your community." It's like the cringiest videos of these people trying to join this new app as a TikTok refugee.
That's funny.
Yeah, it took it to the top of the charts. But apparently, there's some funny behaviors going on. Like I got a hilarious one right here that I pulled up. Some guy joined as a TikTok refugee, and he said, "I hope it's okay that you let me here." And then they just write back, "Welcome, but we banned pornography and drugs." That's it. That was a comment.
Fair
and
enough.
Then, well, what's funny is they're joining this app, which is quite ironic, is that they're joining the name of an app, which ostensibly is about Mao Zedong's Little Red Book, named after it. If not, apologize to the Stanford founder. But I'm just gonna play it out. They're also gonna nuke this app. If they're gonna nuke TikTok, this app's gonna get nuked
probably
too.
the same idea.
I don't know what people are thinking that they're gonna be able to ride this out, but I'd say bye to Little Red Book too while we're at it.
What do you reckon, Troy? If you were making a bet right now, I know this is completely made up. We're just messing around here, but do you think Elon gets it done in time, or someone else comes in? Obviously, there was that original Oracle deal. And the whole idea is if they sell the US part of TikTok, it will be without the algorithm, most likely. And that's obviously a very important part of what makes it an enjoyable platform.
Kevin O'Leary is trying to buy it. The owner of the LA Dodgers, Frank McCourt, the owner of the LA Dodgers, and Mr. Wonderful. Can you imagine the deal making he's trying to do? He wants royalties. No, they said they're willing to buy TikTok with. Well, let me ask you this, Bilal. So I'll give you my odds. I'll say 20% that Elon pulls it off, and it goes to Elon. 80% doesn't happen. I think it just gets nuked.
It just shuts down.
Yeah, it just shuts down, like you said, the slow kind of withering away. So I'd ask you this: would you do the Frank McCourt, Kevin O'Leary deal? You buy it without the algorithm, but you get the brand and the users for $20 billion. I don't even know if it's on the table, but that's what they're offering.
Do you know what it's worth with the algorithm right now on paper?
They floated $50 billion on Bloomberg, but I mean, if this thing was fully valued and it could operate, it'd be like $100 billion.
I think they're interesting because I originally always thought the algorithm would be so hard to replicate because it's the secret sauce, and maybe that is actually the case. But I mean, surely, I don't know how. I feel like if they kept it going, there wasn't much of a gap, and the user base is still there, and they put basically an equivalent of what you have on Instagram and YouTube shorts and reels. I don't know, man. I don't know how. I don't want to say how complicated could it be, because maybe it is very complicated and is so secret saucy. But I feel like if you've got the people in there, and there's if you think about incentives, they've already got the creators there. They've already got people enjoying it. They're following. There's some sort of social graph, interest graph. It shouldn't be. I think it's still very valuable.
There's obviously a price where it's worth it just for the shell, right? Clearly, there's a price. But
especially
I guess
if it's a platform that already, like X, for example, will be incredibly helpful because they're going to have the one click.
Oh, dude. I mean,
just go sign up there.
The X TikTok XAI combo going public, that's like I said, $200 billion company instantly. I still think TikTok in the short form video format is terrible. I think it's just bad for your brain. And I think
Not going anywhere though.
Yeah,
it's on Instagram.
you're right.
It's on
You're
YouTube.
right. Unfortunately, it's not going anywhere. But so there's that, and yeah, we'll end up. Let's wrap it with CES.
Yeah. So what was going on? Well, you said you've been to CES before. I'm trying to think if I've been, because I've been. I don't think I actually went in the end. No, I was 1 year I was supposed to go and I didn't end up going. But I was just with my friend who was there, and he was doing some cool stuff because I think I told you he's now publicly doing it. So he's taken a role at the Sphere, which is obviously a big part of the Vegas experience. I was getting the lowdown of all the things that are going on.
We should talk about that in a future episode.
About the Sphere?
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy business, but very interesting. One of one sort of situation going on.
Let me show you this though. Bilal, what do you see?
Was that a little mini Cybertruck with a phone on top?
This is hilarious. So shout out here to Steven Sinofsky.
And then a little AirPod charger in the back.
I'll tell you what
Pretty
it is. His Steven does an amazing roundup of CES every year, and this article I recommend people go to. It's called Hardcore Software.learningbyshipping.com. I know that's a big mouthful, but we'll link it. He did a whole roundup, but this image he had is of a Cybertruck charger. Blah. The bed charges the phone. Oh, sorry. The front charges the phone. The bed charges the AirPods, and the back charges. So that's a product. But yeah, I mean, dude, it's a crazy event. I think 150,000 people show up, 50,000 booths.
Crazy.
It shuts down.
There's always
Las
some
Vegas.
wild demos you see.
Yeah, you see the wildest demos. But I'll just wrap up quickly. Is like what Steven wrote was. Jensen is now the king of keynotes. There hasn't been anything like Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs, pretty much, right?
He's a new, yeah. I mean, Elon obviously had a bunch, but I'd say that Jensen is more charismatic on stage, and Elon just kind of does his thing. Obviously, also these launches, but I think Jensen, the vibe that Jensen had, Steven's saying that he's top dog, no question, right now as tech CEO. And the thing that was interesting that they announced was we joked about the Project Digits. They made their own Mac Mini. And this is something for the listeners, Edge of the Internet, keep an eye out on, is if they actually commercialize that, it's an AI first Mac Mini, essentially. You're going to see some really crazy stuff happening. Because that's like, we talk about AI
very cool,
computing in the cloud or computing locally. You're going to see some crazy things happen when people can start doing AI locally with this $3,000 device out there. I don't think they've greenlit it 100%. But because like you said, a lot of products at CES never see the light of day, right? But a lot
of it is like a promise for the future, proof of concept.
Exactly.
And to clarify, I'm nowhere near technical enough to explain this, but you can already do a lot of AI stuff locally with the open source models. You can basically download it.
Oh yeah, you can do it on your laptop.
But NVIDIA level, this is like next level.
They basically said this is 1,000 times more powerful than your standard laptop.
That's mad.
Laptop.
Yeah, that's mental.
And it's AI first because you have the GPU set, right? So like, I don't even know
the capability
what that means.
of just think of like what it was like when we went from mainframes to personal computer, and like just the amount of innovation that unlocks. Obviously, this would be something in a similar vein. Very cool. Was there any other cool stuff, CES, like fun stuff you saw?
No, the other one, I'll shout out to Lenovo. My a friend of mine does kind of works with them on comm stuff. They have a laptop that rolls up. So if you want to increase the screen, it just rolled up. I mean, if Rafa can throw that up, or if not, people don't really need to see it. But that one was cool. And no, nothing really. Not AI. I think Jensen by far won it.
All right, great stuff, man. Yeah, really solid chat today. Thanks, Trunk. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Hopefully Jack should be back next week for the gang reunion. And we'll see you guys. Happy New Year. 2 weeks later. And we'll see you guys next week. Peace.